let us do the synopsis here of Punisher number 6, which now our creative team, just to kind of give you a heads up, Mike Barron is still going to be writing, but the art has changed. Penciled by David Ross, inked by Kevin Nolan, lettered by Kenneth Bruzenak, and colored by John Wellington. So the Punisher number 6 throws Frank Castle into a toxic underworld where organized crime, illegal dumping, and something far more dangerous collide. After discovering corpses in a garbage truck, Frank traces the trail to the Rossetti brothers' waste operation and a rival outfit, Unicem, tied to the Macuzzi crime family. Infiltrating their compound, he uncovers a horrifying scheme involving hazardous waste, buried bodies, and a clandestine plutonium deal with foreign buyers. As Frank battles through armed thugs in a landfill filled with leaking drums and human remains, he realizes the stakes are bigger than mob turf. There's a potential nuclear threat on U.S. soil. Unfortunately, the plutonium slips away, and just as Frank prepares to escalate, the Rossettis arrive in force, setting the stage for an all-out confrontation, while Frank grimly notes he's got a lot of cleaning up to do. Okay, so let's talk about this issue real quick. This is a solid Punisher issue. It's also one that really made me realize the pattern that the series is kind of settling into here. Story-wise, we kick things off with Frank discovering bodies in a garbage truck, which leads him down the trail of a waste management operation tied to the Rossetti brothers, and a rival group, Unicem, connected to the Macuzzi crime family. From there, it's classic Punisher. Investigate, infiltrate, and eventually shoot your way out. But what this issue does differently, and I think what helps it stand out, is kind of the scale of the threat. We're not just dealing with drugs or local crime here. We've got plutonium, we've got international buyers, and we've got the implication that there could be a bomb built on U.S. soil. That's a big step in terms of stakes. It makes the story feel more important, even if the way we get there feels familiar. And that's kind of where I land on this issue overall. Bigger stakes, same structure. Because structurally, this is still very much a Punisher story by the numbers. Frank tracks down the bad guys, infiltrates their operation, gets into a firefight, and escapes, or at least plans to escape, just in time. By this point in the series, I can kind of see the formula forming, and this issue doesn't really break away from it. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you're here for Punisher doing Punisher things, you're getting exactly what you signed up for. But it does mean that from a storytelling standpoint, nothing here really surprised me. What did stand out, though, was the setting. This issue takes place largely in a landfill, and I've got to say, that's probably the most memorable part of the whole book. You've got Frank crawling through garbage, dealing with toxic waste, using Geiger counters, finding bodies in leaking barrels. It's gross, it's gritty, and it feels different from the usual warehouses and compounds we've been seeing. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that the environment does more heavy lifting than the villains do in this issue. Because when it comes to the villains, Yasir, McGarry, the Macuzzi connection, they're fine. They serve their purpose, they're a credible threat, but there's nothing about them that really sticks with you. They feel like typical Punisher bad guys. And that's about it. Now, as far as Frank himself goes, this issue feels a little less character-focused than what we got in the previous issue. There's not a lot of deep introspection here. He's very much in soldier mode. He sees something wrong, he moves in to fix it. He doesn't really need to understand every detail before pulling the trigger. That said, there are a couple small touches that I did like. There's a moment where he uses blow darts on some guard dogs and mentions that he hates hurting animals. And then there's this recurring imagery of wild roses growing in the middle of all this garbage. Frank keeps noticing them, and it's interesting because it's kind of this contrast, something beautiful that's growing out of something filthy. Now, I don't know if the book is going to fully explore that, but it does add a little bit of texture to Frank. It humanizes him just a bit, even if the issue as a whole isn't diving deep into his psyche. And when it comes to the action, I'll be honest, I lean more toward the big shootout moments than the stealth stuff going on in this one. But there's some fun bits here too. I mean, the pole vault over the fence, come on, that's just great. That's the kind of over-the-top Punisher logic that you kind of have to love. And once this thing kicks off, you got the rocket launchers, grenades, firefight. It delivers on the action front for sure. Now, one thing I will say is that this issue very much feels like a setup for the next one. It doesn't really stand on its own. The plutonium is still out there. The conflict between the crime families is still brewing. And then you've got the Rossettis showing up at the end, which is a pretty solid cliffhanger. It looks like Frank is about to get caught in the middle of a full-on war between these two factions, and I'm curious to see how that plays out. So yeah, the ending works. It got me interested in what's coming next. But at the same time, when I step back and look at the issue as a whole, I'm not walking away with a ton to think about. This isn't one of those issues where I'm sitting there analyzing Frank's mindset on the deeper themes of the story. Instead, I'm just kind of going, well, that was a solid action story. And that's okay. If I had to sum it up, I'd say this. This is a good, entertaining Punisher issue with bigger stakes and a really unique setting, but it still plays things pretty safe when it comes to structure and character. I'd probably rank it just a bit above issue 3, mostly because of the setting and the escalation and threat, but it's still kind of in that same tier. So yeah, issue 6, solid issue, nothing groundbreaking, but definitely enough here to keep me moving forward into issue 7, which is titled Wild Rose. And based on how this one ends, it looks like that's where everything's going to come to a head. Now, as we get into Punisher issue number 7, our creative team has a bit of a change here, so still written by Mike Barron, penciled by David Ross, inked by John R. Beatty, lettered by Kenneth Bruzenak, and colored by John Wellington. So the synopsis for issue 7 follows Frank Castle as this mob war is about to break out at this toxic landfill, but also has escalated into a terrorist plot involving stolen plutonium. After narrowly escaping suspicion by posing as Israeli intelligence, Frank teams up with a woman named Rose Kugel, who claims to be working for Mossad, Israeli intelligence, and shares a personal vendetta against terrorists. Together, they uncover that the attackers don't plan to detonate a bomb, but instead use a crane in Times Square to disperse radioactive material over a crowded theater event. As they fight their way to the top of the crane, Frank disrupts the mechanism while Rose confronts the terrorist, Ahmad, but she is ultimately killed in the struggle. Frank stops the plutonium attack, but the victory is hollow. He later learns Rose was never Mossad at all, just another vigilante driven by loss and revenge, leaving him alone again, reflecting on the fleeting presence of something pure, a wild rose that briefly grew in the midst of his world of garbage. After I sat with this one, I don't think the issue is really about stopping a terrorist plot. I think the issue is about Frank Castle almost finding an equal and then losing it. Now, yeah, the plot's here. I mean, you've got this plutonium storyline carrying over, and I do think the issue delivers on that better than what we were expecting. You go in thinking bomb, and instead what you get is something a lot more devious. It's this idea that they're going to use a crane to just dump radioactive material onto a crowd in Times Square. That's horrifying, but in a different way, you know? So from a plot standpoint, I think that's a strong payoff. But that's not what stuck with me. What stuck with me is Rose. As soon as she shows up, the book shifts. Frank suddenly has someone to play off of, and not just anybody, somebody he actually respects. You can see it in the way he watches her operate, the way he starts thinking about working with her. And for maybe the first time in this run, you get this sense that, okay, maybe Frank doesn't have to do this completely alone. Now, I don't think the book goes overboard with it. This isn't a romance. It's not like earlier issues where things move way too fast in that direction. This is more about mutual respect. Two people who are very good at what they do, recognizing that in each other. For a brief moment, it feels like there's a possibility there. Not even happiness necessarily, but maybe partnership? Maybe somebody who actually understands the mission the same way he does? And then the issue takes that away. The final act on the crane is great. Don't get me wrong. It's tense, visually memorable. It's a clever setup. But what really matters is what happens to Rose. Because yeah, I kind of expected she might not make it out of this. I mean, it had that feeling. But it still lands. And it lands even harder with that final twist. That she wasn't Israeli intelligence at all. She basically put herself into this situation driven by the same kind of loss that drives Frank. She's not some official agent or part of some system. She's just like him. And I think that's why this works as well as it does, not because the story is just saying something about revenge, but because it shows you that someone else walked the same path, and it ended the same way. Now, I do think the issue has a weakness here. Rose doesn't get enough time. You give her another issue or two, let that partnership breathe a little bit more, and her death probably hits even harder than it already does. As it stands, the story is working more with the idea of Rose than fully developing her. But even with that, it's effective. Because by the end, when Frank says, "I am left with the garbage," that line hits. And yeah, it ties back to the landfill, the toxic waste, all that, but it's bigger than that too. It's his world. It's what he's stuck in. And for a brief moment, there was something different there, something that stood out, and now it's gone. So no, I don't think this is a turning point for Frank in the series. It doesn't change him in any way. It doesn't send him in a new direction. But what it does do is remind you how bleak his life really is. Because even when something good shows up, something that looks like it could matter, it's always at risk. And more often than not, it doesn't survive. And that's what this issue left me with more than anything else. The idea that Frank Castle almost didn't have to do this alone. And now, he's back to where he started.